The rain fell in thick curtains, drumming on black umbrellas like a funeral dirge. 8-year-old Lina clutched her father's hand, her small fingers trembling in his calloused palm. Before them, her mother's coffin slowly descended into the soaking wet earth, each shovelful of mud resounding like a farewell. Lina didn't understand everything, not yet. She just knew that Mama would never again sing her a lullaby, wipe her tears, or whisper that she was her little star. "Daddy, why is she sleeping under the ground?" she asked, her voice broken by the icy wind. Paul, her father, his eyes red-rimmed and his cheeks hollowed by sleepless nights, was silent for a moment. He ran a hand through his disheveled blonde hair, searching for words he didn't have. She's gone, sweetheart. But she's watching over you, from above." Lina nodded, confused, her muddy boots sinking into the ground. She wanted to believe Daddy, but all she felt was a chilling void where her mother's love had always been, a void that seemed to swallow everything she was. The months that followed were like a thick fog, a silent purgatory. The house, once vibrant with laughter, songs, and the smell of lemon cake, became an empty shell. The walls, wallpapered with faded flowers chosen by her mother, seemed to close in on Lina. She spent her evenings alone in her room, surrounded by toys she no longer touched, hugging her teddy bear, Mr. Bear, as if he could fill the silence. "I miss you, Mama," she whispered, stroking his worn fur. "Why aren't you here to hug me?" Mr. Bear didn't answer, but his glass eyes seemed to understand. Paul, meanwhile, delved into his factory work. He came home late, his shoulders stooped under the weight of grief, bills, and a loneliness he never admitted. He tried to smile for Lina, to make her jam sandwiches, to ask her how school was. But his eyes betrayed a pain he couldn't hide, and his smiles were like shards of glass, fragile and sharp. One evening, he sat with her on the sofa, a cup of hot chocolate in his hands. The pale light of the lamp cast shadows on his tired face. "Lina, I know it's hard without Mama. But we're going to get through this, you and me. Okay?" Lina, nestled against him, nodded. "Okay, Daddy." She loved these rare moments when he was there, truly there, when she could almost feel the old warmth of their home. But these moments became increasingly rare. Paul plunged deeper into his work, leaving before dawn, returning after nightfall. Lina learned to manage on her own. She made her breakfast, put her clothes in the machine, and did her homework at the wobbly kitchen table. She didn't complain. She wanted to be a good girl, the one Daddy deserved, the one Mama would have been proud of. A year after her mother's death, a new light seemed to ignite in Paul's eyes. He met Elodie in a cafe where he drank his black coffee, the kind he drank to stay awake. Elodie was a waitress, an elegant woman with shiny black hair, a radiant smile, and a soft voice like a spring whisper. She knew how to listen, ask questions, and laugh at his tired jokes. For Paul, she was a buoy in an ocean of despair. "Lina, I have someone I'd like you to meet," he announced one day, a glimmer of hope in his eyes, a glimmer Lina hadn't seen in a long time. Elodie entered their home like a summer breeze, bringing flowers, cakes, and promises of a better future. "Oh, Lina, you're adorable," she said, handing her a small cupcake decorated with a sugar star. "We're going to get along great, you'll see." Lina, intimidated, smiled shyly, her cheeks flushing under the attention. Elodie seemed kind, and Daddy was happy, truly happy. His shoulders seemed less heavy, his laughter less forced. Maybe everything would be better now. Maybe this woman could fill the void, bring warmth back into their home. When Elodie moved in, everything changed, but not as Lina had hoped. The furniture was rearranged, the curtains replaced, and Mama's photos were relegated to a dusty drawer. Lina watched it all from her room, clutching Mr. Bear, her heart pounding with a fear she didn't understand. At first, Elodie was gentle in front of Paul. She cooked delicious meals, roast chicken or apple pie, and laughed at his factory stories. She kissed Lina on the forehead, bought her colorful hair clips, and told her, "You're a little princess, you know?" Paul beamed, convinced he had found a family again. But as soon as the door closed behind him, as soon as the factory van disappeared around the corner, Elodie's mask fell, revealing a harsh face and eyes as cold as steel. One morning, Lina accidentally spilled her milk, a white stream flowing onto the wooden table. Elodie, who was tidying the kitchen, turned abruptly, her lips pursed. "Look what you've done, you clumsy girl. Clean that up right now." Her voice was sharp, like a shard of glass. Lina, her cheeks burning, grabbed a napkin with trembling hands. "I'm sorry, Elodie." "Sorry isn't enough," she retorted, her eyes narrowed. "You're always in my way, spilling everything, ruining everything." Lina lowered her head, her heart pounding. She didn't understand why Elodie was so different when Daddy wasn't there, why her words hurt so much. She cleaned the table in silence, each rub of the napkin resonating like a reproach. Days turned into weeks, and Elodie's cruelty intensified, like a storm gaining strength. She always found a reason to punish Lina: a poorly washed plate, a toy forgotten on the sofa, a look deemed insolent. The chores piled up, scrubbing the floor, tidying the laundry, cleaning the bathroom until her small hands were red and sore. "You're useless," Elodie would snap, her voice low but venomous. "Why are you always here, dragging your feet like a burden?" Lina obeyed, head down, hoping that one day, perhaps, Elodie would become the sweet woman she had been at first, the one who offered her cupcakes. But each day brought a new wound. One evening, Lina tried to do her homework in the kitchen, her pencil scratching the paper diligently. Elodie entered, furious, her heels clacking on the tiles. "What are you doing here? You're making a mess with your crayons." "But Daddy said I could." Lina stammered, her voice trembling. "Your father isn't here, so I decide." Elodie yelled, snatching the notebook from her hands. Under Lina's horrified eyes, she tore the pages in half, the sheets falling like broken feathers. "Go to your room, and no dinner tonight." Lina ran upstairs, tears burning her cheeks, her stomach knotted with hunger and fear. She locked herself in her room, sat on her bed, and took out her mother's photo hidden under her pillow. It was an old, slightly crumpled photo, where her mother was laughing, her blonde hair dancing in the wind. "Mama, help me," Lina whispered, her tears falling onto the paper. "Why did you leave? Why am I all alone?" Paul saw nothing. Absorbed by his work, he came home late, exhausted, his clothes permeated with the smell of oil and metal. Elodie greeted him with kisses, a glass of wine, and sugary lies. "Lina was difficult today," she sighed, playing with a lock of hair. "She doesn't listen to me, you know." Paul frowned, tired. "Lina, you have to obey Elodie, okay?" "Yes, Daddy," Lina replied, her throat tight, her eyes avoiding his. She wanted to tell him the truth, to shout that Elodie was hurting her, that she was scared, that she wasn't eating enough. But something held her back, a visceral fear. What if Daddy didn't believe her? What if Elodie was right, if she really was a bad girl, useless, a burden? One evening, Paul noticed a purple mark on Lina's arm, a finger-shaped bruise. "What's that?" he asked, worried. Elodie, quick as lightning, answered before Lina could speak. "She fell in the yard, the poor thing. You know how clumsy she is." Paul nodded, convinced, his brow furrowed with exhaustion. Lina looked down, a silent scream trapped in her chest, a scream she dared not let out. Lina's pain intensified, digging a little deeper into her heart each day. Elodie became bolder, more cruel. She deprived her of meals for minor infractions. "You left a crumb on the table, no lunch." She forced her to stand for hours to learn discipline, her little legs trembling with fatigue. Sometimes, when Lina cried, Elodie would grab her arm, her nails digging into her skin. "Stop whimpering, or I'll give you a real reason to cry." Lina learned to swallow her tears, to make herself small, invisible. She lived in the shadows, a shadow that grew as Elodie took possession of the house, of her father, of her life. At school, she remained silent, avoiding the gazes of other children. Her clothes, too big and worn, hid the bruises on her arms, but not the sadness in her eyes. A teacher, Mrs. Clare, noticed her change, the way she flinched at the slightest sound, how she hid her lunch as if she feared it would be taken from her. "Lina, is everything all right at home?" she asked one day, her voice gentle. Lina nodded, her lips sealed. She wanted to speak, but the fear was stronger, a fear that whispered Elodie would know, that she would be punished even more harshly. One evening, after a particularly cruel punishment, Elodie had locked her in the closet for 2 hours for spilling a glass of water. Lina collapsed on her bed, holding her mother's photo. Her tears flowed silently, wetting the paper. "Mama, why did you leave?" she whispered. "I want to be with you." She closed her eyes, imagining her mother's arms around her, her lavender scent, her voice singing an old lullaby. But when she opened her eyes, there was only silence, and the fear of a new tomorrow. It was then that Madame Berard entered her life, like a glimmer in the darkness. Madame Berard lived in the house next door, a small building with blue shutters and a garden filled with roses. She was an old lady with gray hair tied in a bun, with piercing but warm eyes. She always had a kind word for Lina, a biscuit to offer, a story to tell. For several months, she had noticed things: the way Lina walked, her shoulders slumped, as if she carried the weight of the world, her dull gaze, her hollow cheeks, the bruises she hid under sleeves that were too long. She saw Lina's worn clothes, always the same, and her beaten dog look when she came home from school. One afternoon, as Lina passed her house, dragging her school bag, Madame Berard called out to her. "Lina, come have some tea with me. I've made cookies, they're still warm." Lina hesitated, glancing nervously towards her house. Elodie had forbidden her to talk to neighbors, but the sweet smell of cookies and Madame Berard's smile were too tempting. She entered, intimidated, into a living room that seemed straight out of a fairy tale: soft cushions, lace doilies, subdued light from a fringed lamp. "How are you, my dear?" Madame Berard asked, placing a plate of cookies in front of her. Lina, staring at her hands, murmured, "Fine." But her voice trembled, and her fingers clenched the hem of her sweater as if to anchor herself. Madame Berard didn't press her. She talked about her childhood, her own sorrows, the war she had experienced as a child. "You know, sometimes, the people we love don't see everything. But there's always someone, somewhere, who's listening." Lina looked up, surprised. Something in Madame Berard's voice, in her gaze, made her want to talk. But she remained silent, the fear still too strong. In the following days, Madame Berard found excuses to see Lina. She invited her to water her roses, feed her old cat, and listen to stories. One day, she told her about her own mother-in-law, a harsh woman who had made her suffer. "I was also afraid to speak," she confided, her wrinkled hands clutching a teacup. "But one day, I found someone who listened to me, and it changed everything." Lina, wide-eyed, whispered, "Really?" "Yes," Madame Berard replied with a sad smile. "Sometimes, you just have to find the right person." That day, Lina felt something crack within her, like a dam about to break. She went home, her heart pounding, torn between hope and terror. A week later, everything changed. Elodie, furious after finding a stain on the carpet, punished Lina by depriving her of dinner and forcing her to scrub the floor until midnight. Lina, exhausted, collapsed in her room, her hands trembling and her eyes burning with tears. She heard the front door slam. Paul had just returned. Elodie immediately changed her tone, her voice becoming sugary. "Oh, darling, what a day. Lina has been mischievous again, but don't worry, I'm handling it." Paul mumbled something, too tired to delve deeper. Lina, hidden in her room, hugged Mr. Bear, her heart screaming in pain. The next day, Madame Berard was waiting for her at school dismissal. "Lina, my dear, come with me." Lina, exhausted, followed without thinking. In the warm living room, Madame Berard sat next to her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Lina, I see something is wrong. You can talk to me. I promise I will listen." Lina hesitated, her gaze moving from the steaming cup to her mother's photo that she clutched in her pocket. Then, meeting Madame Berard's kind eyes, she felt a warmth wash over her, like a ray of sunshine after a long night. The words poured out like a torrent, at first hesitant, then desperate. "Elodie, she's mean to me. She yells at me, sometimes she hits me. She says I'm useless, that I'm good for nothing. She doesn't let me eat, and I'm scared all the time." Her tears flowed, burning, and her voice broke. "I tried to tell Daddy, but he believes her. And if I talk, she'll be even meaner." Madame Berard hugged her, her heart aching. "You're not useless, Lina. You are a brave little girl, and you are no longer alone. I promise you." Madame Berard acted quickly. She contacted social services, explaining everything Lina had told her, describing the bruises, the hunger, the fear. She insisted they act immediately. But that wasn't all. By a twist of fate, another witness entered the scene, Mark, Elodie's husband. For Elodie, before moving in with Paul, had been married to Mark, a discreet man who still lived in the neighboring town. Their marriage had fallen apart due to her manipulative behavior, but they had never officially divorced. Mark, who had heard rumors about Elodie's new life, began asking questions. When he learned from a mutual friend that Elodie was living with a man and his daughter, he decided to investigate further. He visited Paul one evening, under the pretext of retrieving some things Elodie had left behind. Upon seeing Lina, he immediately noticed her terrified look, her thin arms, the marks she tried to hide. Mark knew Elodie, her cruelty, her hidden anger. He himself had suffered her manipulations, her tantrums, and he knew she was capable of the worst. "Paul, we need to talk," Mark said, his face serious, after Elodie had gone out to run errands. Paul, surprised, let him in. "What's going on?" "It's about Elodie," Mark replied, his voice low. "I'm her husband, yes, her husband. She never told you we weren't divorced, did she?" Paul paled, stunned. "What?" Mark continued, relentless. "Elodie has always been manipulative. But that's not all. I've seen your daughter, Paul. She's terrified, thin, covered in bruises. I know Elodie, and I know what she does when she thinks no one is watching. She's abusing Lina, isn't she?" Paul shook his head, incredulous. "No, she wouldn't do that. Lina is just clumsy, she falls often." But his words sounded hollow, and a cold fear rose within him. Mark stared at him, his dark eyes full of suppressed anger. "Listen to me. I've seen what Elodie can do. She lied to me, manipulated me, humiliated me for years. And now, she's taking it out on your daughter. If you don't believe me, ask Lina. But do it when Elodie isn't around." That night, Paul waited until Elodie was asleep. He went up to Lina's room, his heart pounding. She was curled up on her bed, clutching her mother's photo. "Lina, my dear," he whispered, sitting next to her. "Tell me the truth. Is she hurting you?" Lina looked up, terrified, but seeing her father's broken gaze, she felt she could finally speak. "Yes, Daddy," she whispered, her tears flowing. "She yells at me, she hits me, she doesn't let me eat. I'm scared all the time." Paul felt his world collapse. How could he have been so blind? How could he have let his little girl suffer under his own roof? He held her in his arms, his own tears falling on her hair. "I'm sorry, Lina. I promise you it will stop. The next day, Paul confronted Elodie in the living room, his voice trembling with rage. "It's over, Elodie. I know everything. The bruises, the hunger, the fear. How could you do that to my daughter?" Elodie, caught off guard, tried to play innocent. "What? Lina is lying. She wants to make me out to be the bad guy. She's jealous, Paul, can't you see?" But Paul, for the first time, didn't listen to her. "Get out of this house. Now." Elodie screamed, protested, hurled insults, but he remained inflexible. She left, slamming the door, leaving a heavy silence behind her. But the story didn't end there. Mark, determined to prevent Elodie from causing harm again, filed a complaint against her for abuse, providing evidence of her past behavior and testimonies from neighbors who had seen Lina suffer. Madame Berard, for her part, testified to social services, describing every detail Lina had confided in her. The authorities, alerted by these cross-accusations, investigated quickly. Elodie was arrested in a dingy apartment where she had taken refuge. During her trial, she tried to deny, to manipulate, but the evidence was overwhelming: the bruises on Lina's arms, the testimonies of Madame Berard and Mark, the social services reports. The judge, a woman with severe eyes, pronounced the sentence: 3 years in prison for child abuse. Elodie, handcuffed, cast a venomous glance at the courtroom, but no one defended her. Lina, present at the back of the room with her father, looked down, a mixture of relief and sadness in her heart. Paul and Lina began to rebuild their lives, step by step. Paul left his factory job for a daytime job, determined to be a present father. He took Lina to a therapist, a kind woman who helped her put words to her pain, to understand that she was not to blame. Madame Berard became a constant figure, a grandmother at heart who brought cookies, stories, and unwavering support. Lina, little by little, found her smile again. She started drawing again, laughing, and speaking without fear. She learned that silence, the silence she had kept for so long, was sometimes more painful than the truth. 2 years later, she was writing in a journal, sitting under a tree in Madame Berard's garden. "Mama, I'm okay now," she whispered, looking up at the sky. "And I know you're proud of me." The pain was still there, lurking in a corner of her heart, but it was slowly fading, like a shadow under the sun. Lina had found her voice, and with it, the light.